The concrete cap sits about 4 feet across, poured flush into the hillside where water once rose on its own. A valve pokes up through the center, welded shut. People here still call the place a spring, though nothing has come up out of that ground in almost a century. Before the cap, they came with glass jugs and tin pails. The water carried lithium, magnesium, sometimes a faint bite of dissolved carbon dioxide, the kind of minerals that, in the plain language of the era, were said to take the cure. It cost nothing. You walked up, you drank, you left. That arrangement held for generations across hundreds of towns, on more or less every continent people settled. A spring came up, a settlement gathered around it, the sick travelled to it, and then, mostly within a single narrow band of years, the water stopped being something you could simply reach. Not dried up, capped, sealed, fenced, bottled and sold back. The reasons filed in the records rarely match each other from one town to the next. Contamination here, safety there, conservation somewhere else. Yet the outcome is strangely identical everywhere you look. The free water goes behind a wall. The official story is simple, and for a long time it satisfied me. Modern medicine arrived. Antibiotics, vaccines, and pharmaceuticals did what mineral water never actually could, and the springs became quaint relics of a credulous age. Balneotherapy, the practice of taking the waters, lost its scientific standing, and rightly so, most historians say. That account is real, and it is largely fair. The great American spa towns, Saratoga Springs, Hot Springs in Arkansas, French Lick in Indiana, genuinely did fade as germ theory matured and hospitals replaced resorts. People stopped believing that sulfur water cured syphilis because it did not. I want to be honest that this is the sober, documented reading. And for most of the decline, that reading holds. The Pure Food and Drug Act of 1906, and later the Federal Trade Commission, cracked down on the wild health claims printed on mineral water labels. Sellers who promised cures for cancer and paralysis were, correctly, stopped. Regulation caught up with quackery. So far, nothing here is mysterious. Here is the detail that the tidy version has trouble holding. Regulating a false claim is one thing. Sealing the source is another. You do not need to weld a valve shut to stop a company from lying on a label. Yet the physical capping of springs, the concrete, the fences, happened anyway, and it happened widely. Consider Lithia Springs, Georgia. Its water carried natural lithium, a mineral we now know, as documented psychiatric fact, stabilizes mood and is prescribed for bipolar disorder. Presidents drank it. The bottling operation was substantial. And then the plant closed, the Grand Hotel burned, and the specific water that carried a genuine, later verified neuroactive mineral simply left ordinary circulation. I want to be careful. A hotel burning is a hotel burning. Businesses close, tastes change. None of that requires a hidden hand, and I am not going to pretend a single fire is proof of anything. If this were one town, one spring, one closure, I would file it under the ordinary attrition of history and move on. But it is not one town. Follow the same shape across the map, and it repeats with an insistence that starts to feel wrong. A spring known for a specific mineral, a period of open, free public use. Then a closure, a sale, a cap, or a safety fence, and afterward the same water available only in a bottle, at a price, stripped of the claim that once drew people to it. Saratoga is instructive because there the ceiling was literal and official. By the early 20th century, private companies were pumping the carbonated springs so aggressively to extract carbon dioxide for commercial gas that the springs began to fail. New York State intervened, took control, and capped wells to protect them. That part is genuinely documented history, not theory. Read one way, that is conservation, the state saving a resource from private overuse, which is exactly what happened and exactly how it is recorded. I concede that fully. But notice the outcome, whatever the intent. The water that had flowed freely for anyone became a managed, ticketed, state-mediated thing. Access narrowed. The result was the same as suppression, even if the cause was not. And this is where I have to slow down, because the honest version and the uneasy version start to overlap. Every individual closure has a reasonable explanation. Overpumping, contamination, liability, bankruptcy. Each one, alone, is boring and true. The strangeness is not in any single case. The strangeness is in the uniformity of the direction they all point. Let me put the ordinary explanation as strongly as I can, because it deserves that. Across the 20th century, indoor plumbing made walking to a spring pointless. Refrigeration and chlorinated municipal water made the whole ritual obsolete. Cars let people go elsewhere. The spring towns lost their reason to exist, so their springs were neglected into silence. That is coherent. It is coherent, and yet it leaves one thing unexplained that keeps pulling at me. Obsolescence lets a thing decay. It does not usually require you to actively seal it. A neglected spring should simply overgrow, silt up, be forgotten, left open and ignored. The recurring image here is not abandonment, it is a cap. Someone chose to close it. One reading of this, and I want to be clear, this is a reading, an interpretation stacked on top of real facts, not a proven claim, is that what was capped was not just water. It was a free, unmetered source of specific dissolved minerals, some of which, like lithium, we have since confirmed act on the human body and brain in ways no one fully understood at the time. The theory in its stronger form goes further than I can follow comfortably. It holds that these waters carried not only chemistry, but a kind of resonance, a mineral frequency the body was tuned to receive, and that this is what was really being switched off. I have to be plain. There is no evidence for a healing frequency. That part I cannot defend. So let me set the frequency claim aside as unsupported, and keep only what is real. Dissolved lithium, magnesium, and other minerals in accessible water, available free, then made unavailable free. Even stripped down to only the documented chemistry, the pattern is enough to be uncomfortable, without needing to invoke anything mystical to carry it. The stubborn fact remains. The free access ended. Now the harder question, the one that separates a pattern from a plot. Who would coordinate this? Because to call it suppression, you need someone doing the suppressing, and here the theory usually overreaches, pointing at a single architect, a boardroom, a cabal deciding in one room to seal the world's springs. That version I find genuinely hard to believe. The more interesting possibility does not require a cabal at all. Consider what happens without anyone conspiring. A pharmaceutical industry rises with an obvious, unspoken interest in people paying for treatment rather than drinking it for free. A bottling industry rises with an interest in selling water. Regulators rise with an interest in liability and control. None of them need to meet. Each institution, acting only in its own narrow self-interest, pushes in the same direction, toward the enclosure of something that used to be open. The pharmaceutical company does not need to phone the bottler. The regulator does not need to phone either. Shared interest does the work a conspiracy would have to. The silence in this reading organizes itself. That is the genuinely unsettling part, and I want you to sit with it, because it is also the part that needs no villain. Coordination that looks designed can emerge from many actors who never coordinate at all, each simply following incentive. If that is what happened, there is no smoking gun to find. There would be nothing to leak, because nothing was ever agreed. And I have to be fair to the counter-argument here too, because it is strong. Absence of a conspiracy is also, straightforwardly, evidence that there was no conspiracy. No smoking gun is what you would expect to find if nothing sinister occurred at all. A theory that predicts it will find no evidence is a theory that has quietly protected itself from being wrong. I know that. It is the flaw at the center of every idea like this one, and I will not pretend my way around it. The pattern I am describing could be exactly what ordinary economic history looks like when you go looking for meaning in it. Real closures, real minerals, real regulation, arranged by hindsight into a shape that was never actually there. This is the point in the Tartarian branch of the theory where I lose the ability to follow. That larger claim holds that the springs were nodes in a lost, older hydrological network, a coordinated system built by a civilization erased from the record, and that the capping was the deliberate dismantling of an inherited technology. There is no historical evidence for that civilization. I have to say so. So I keep two things in my hands at once, and refuse to let either one drop. In one hand, verified minerals, real free access, documented closures, and industries with obvious incentives. In the other, an enormous interpretive leap, hidden networks, healing frequencies, erased empires that the real facts do not remotely support. The honest position lives painfully between them. What I cannot quite do is let go of the small, specific, physical thing that started this. Not the empires, not the frequencies, just the valve. Somebody, on some ordinary afternoon, brought concrete up a hillside to a spring that had run on its own since before the town had a name, and closed it, and filed a routine reason. Multiply that afternoon by the number of springs it happened to, and something in me still refuses to fully accept obsolescence as the whole account. Not because obsolescence is wrong, but because obsolescence is passive and this was active. Forgetting is passive. A cap is a decision. Every cap represents a person who decided the water should not simply flow. Maybe every one of those decisions was reasonable in its moment. Liability after a child fell in, a landowner tired of trespassers, a health department covering itself. I can build the innocent version cap by cap, and I have, and it works. It just requires me to believe that thousands of small, reasonable decisions happened to all point one way. I keep testing whether that is really so strange. Water flows downhill. Decisions flow along incentives. Perhaps convergence is just what a market looks like, and I am pattern matching noise into intent. That is possible. I would even say it is probable. Probable is not the same as certain, and the residue that probable leaves behind is exactly what I cannot discard. Here is what I would ask you to do, not as a believer, but as someone standing where I am standing. Do not take the frequencies, do not take the lost empire. Take only the documented parts, the lithium that was real, the access that was free, the closures that happened, and ask yourself whether the sober story fully covers them. Then decide for yourself, because I cannot decide for you, and I will not pretend the evidence lets me. This is a theory. It is unproven, unofficial, and at its edges genuinely unsupported. The mainstream explanation may simply be correct, and the pattern I have traced may be nothing but the ordinary residue of a century doing what centuries do to things people stop needing. But the next time you pass one of them, and there is almost certainly one near you, a fenced hillside, a plaque, a dry stone basin with a name that ends in Springs, look for the cap, look for the sealed valve. Then ask the only question the documents never quite answer, not why the water stopped, but why someone had to make sure it did.